Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, and improve business processes so companies can scale and thrive. Now, people ask me, what software do I like that I use in order to document processes and procedures? And I'd like to share with you a software that I really like, which is Sweet Process. Now, Sweet Process is an amazing process documentation software that helps create clear step-by-step instructions for every task in your company, anywhere from onboarding new clients to training employees to responding to client requests. With Sweet Process, you have a central place for the team to access procedures and instructions anytime and from any device. So, as a loyal listener to this podcast, or even if you just joined us for the first time, you can try this software for free with a 28-day free of charge trial. All you need to do is go to sweetprocess.com/Adi, that's ADI, like my name, and you can sign up for your free trial and start using it today. And today's guest is Mimi Banks. Hello, Mimi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Great to have you on the podcast. And Mimi is the founder of MB Social, where she and her team manage social media for top brands in cosmetic, health, tech, and what else? Maybe fashion, right? And entrepreneurs.
Right.
So it's great to have you here. And the reason why I'm excited to have you is because we're going to talk about how you systemize processes and procedures in social media for your clients. And we're going to talk about it. And let's give our audience also some advice on how they can do it and why systems are so important, even when you are managing social media.
Thank you for that.
First, let's hear about your background a little bit. So tell our listeners about your impressive career and then starting your own business 7 years ago.
Sure. So my business came from my background specifically because I worked at L'Oreal for almost 15 years, both in the US and 2 years in France. And I had a few different roles, but the main role was creating and leading social media for the Lancôme brand. And that's where I realized at age 30 something what my passion was. And that's what really catapulted my career. And so shortly after I was working at L'Oreal in Lancôme, or that was my last position, I left and started my own agency because I saw all of the potential and I was very early on in social media. And so that was 7 years ago. And now we work with brands, businesses, entrepreneurs, startups on all things social media. And I think one of the main things that drives our success are the systems and processes that we put in place. Social media can be extremely overwhelming and daunting. It's what are we going to post? How are we going to post? How do we engage our community? And we find that a process or even templates help at least navigate the entire ecosystem a lot better. So the first place we start is with assets. So any kind of assets that you have, they have to be organized, they have to be categorized, and they have to have a label that is easy to find. And that sounds really simple, but it's actually really not. So to be able to gather all of your content into one place and really organize them into a way that anybody can understand what they are is the first thing. So you'll find that people go through all their pictures, all their videos, everything they have, but to get it into one place, that actually takes a lot of time.
It does. I can relate to it because it applies to everything. Like also if you have, let's say people start documenting things and putting it in different folders and then just putting it all together and purging the things that you don't need and labeling it correctly. So I totally can relate to it. Absolutely.
Right. Naming conventions are huge. So how you name something, we have the same naming conventions for every file, every asset, every single thing that we do. So it's very easy to file. It's very easy to find later, a month later, a year later. So it starts on one side with the assets. Then the second side is that we create calendars. So calendars help us, and it sounds very simple, but you'd be surprised. Calendars help with the planning part of it. So you can keep track of all of the moving pieces, the dates, the content, the copy, the hashtags, the social media holidays, the approvals, every single thing that you could possibly think of, all in one place. And we've created these templates for each of our clients, and it's a go-to place that's great because we can share. And so the client always knows what we're doing. We know what the client's thinking. You can add comments, and it's always a working document. For example, if you wanted to go back and see something that was posted, or the client wants to approve something, they know where to go. So having a one-stop shop, or just a process to be able to understand what you're going to post or to be able to plan in advance, simplifies everything.
Absolutely. What platform do you use for the calendars?
That's Google Docs. So we create a Google Docs with tabs. So the first thing that we do in the tab is we have all the passwords, which may not be good for everybody because it's probably not the most secure, but right now it works. The second tab, we have contacts. So we know that if we have specific contacts we need to reach out to. The third tab, we have hashtags that we most commonly use. And then we build tabs by month. And each month has the same process. Each month has a date, has an event, and then a bunch of columns that are exactly the same month over month. So if we're in the month of May now, and a client wants something, talking about July 4th, we can quickly earmark something, and we are extremely organized, and we know when to come back to it. So that part is very, very straightforward for us. And we've been able to implement that across every single client.
Nice.
And
yeah, so it allows you to go back to do an analysis of what worked, what didn't work. It takes the guesswork out of it. It's not as overwhelming, right? Because there's just specific actions that you can do in a month. Perfect.
That's right. It really makes it less overwhelming because you have everything in one place. We have clients that start sending things a lot. And so we created a tab for new documents, everything that's new, and new, and then they date it. And so to be able to have that process in place, we know to check that tab once or twice a day when there's something new. And that's become part of what we do. And we know, and then we update the tab and they get back to us. So really, again, it's everybody kind of working together to be able to have this one document constantly updated, because specifically the bigger the brand you are, or the more information you have to share, it's hard to keep all of that organized and become very overwhelming very quickly.
Absolutely. So that, in your opinion, would that work for big brands and as well as for entrepreneurs that,
Sure.
I mean, a solopreneur or somebody that has only a team of 5? Yeah.
Sure, that works for anyone. So even for myself, if maybe I don't know what I want to post, I don't know what my plans are, I can start off by looking at a calendar, identifying maybe key dates, identifying maybe holidays, people's birthdays, or start building the calendar around moments in time and then filling it in as I go. So at least then that starts to at least take the weight off of a blank sheet of paper and starting from scratch. You already have some things filled in.
Yeah, I agree. You know, sometimes I hear the question, or people ask me the question of, you know, I'm a small company. I only have 10 or 20 employees. This sounds like something to do for bigger companies. But the truth is that even if the smaller you are, the more systems you need, because you end up wearing all the hats.
That's
and
right.
In order to wear them, to be able to wear all of them in the amount of hours that we have, you do have to be super organized, even more than a big company that might have a little bit more of a leeway. Right. I know that big companies have to be very organized as well, but it applies to everyone, basically.
That's true. So even if somebody is out, if someone needs a vacation day, someone else on the team can step in because they know the process. They know to look at the specific post. They know tomorrow is May 8th. They know tomorrow is May 9th, whatever the date is that they're looking for, that they can go in and see what the status is something approved, and just pick it up with no problem. And then because everything is organized in the same way, they know where to find the content. They know where to find the assets, because we have everything saved in Google folders, always in the same order and in the same way. So all the folders for every client are always the same. The content is obviously different, but they know what the same, again, the naming conventions are very important, because now with someone can easily switch between clients. So we have somebody that's an entrepreneur, someone who's a motivational speaker, and then we have a skincare company. They have the same folders. And
Absolutely. So what will be some example of name conventions that you will recommend?
So naming conventions just for data or assets, we do the month, the date, the year underscore description. So it's like 2 digits, I guess, dot 2 digits, dot 2 digits underscore description. So that's kind of what we use for every file and every asset. And then the other naming conventions are just more about for our meeting notes, for PR, for content. We have something called an asset library, but every client has an asset library. So again, we know what to look for. We make sure when we start with a new client, we have an onboarding checklist. So we go through every single onboarding checklist and make sure that those things happen and those are created.
Yeah, so important to have the onboarding checklist. So it's also for your own business, right? And also for the client, the experience that the client receives. And
that's right.
For our listeners too. I mean, onboarding checklists are so important. And that is a key for success for a business. So every client gets the same treatment and you know that you are providing the service, no matter how busy you are.
That's right.
You just get them through it. Absolutely.
And you don't forget anything. So you keep it for yourself because you're probably doing so many things that you can make sure that they get the right experience and that it's something that you can also systematize. And again, you don't forget. So I think that that's important too, specifically if you have one client, if you have more than one client, whatever it is, and it can evolve as it goes. But the more you can create these processes, the easier it becomes on you. Specifically, if you're a small business and you can't delegate it to a lot of people, you have to go back and remember. So we use Google Docs. I have an onboarding checklist. I even have an onboarding email. I created the email already and I created blanks and blank hyperlinks so that I can go back to this email, copy and paste and fill it in. Hi, welcome to MB Social. We're so glad to have you. Here is, and then I have basically the folders that are already, can you fill out this folder? Here's what this folder is, and then leaving space so I can hyperlink them. But it's made my life so much easier. So I don't have to write that email every time. And also to make sure that I remember.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Mimi, let's talk about strategy and social media. I mean, I have the expert here, working with top brand companies. And how does strategy relates to the actual execution and the systems? Like how do you see the connection between those two?
I think from a strategy perspective, and people like to use that word a lot, it's basically the why that you're doing it. It's the plan. So the strategy helps inform the system. The strategy helps tell you how you're going to create the system. And that is, I think, is a little bit more flexible, but essentially the strategy is telling you what to do. For example, how many times a week that you're going to post on Instagram, what kind of content that you're going to post on Instagram. So then what we have done is we make sure that our content calendar, so our system, has all of those different mechanisms already pre-populated so we know that it can be strategic also. For example, what theme are you going to be talking about? And we make sure to fill in each theme in the beginning of the month to make sure we've covered the right topics and reinforce whatever strategy that client is looking for. So that's been built into the calendar system.
That's great. So that's the integration of you have the overall idea. So you don't just go in different directions, right? You have a direction where you're going.
Very structured. It's very structured. So at the top of the calendar, it has the month. At the top of the calendar, it has the focus. But then the other part of it is meeting with the client. So the other thing that we do is when we meet with the client each week, is that we make sure to list out, we have a little table that we share in our meeting notes that was that month or the upcoming month, which is the focus. We make sure that if there's a new cover photo, if there's a link in the bio, what the upcoming holidays are and the moments to pay attention to, if there's an Instagram live. Every client has this box. So it keeps, again, these things that keep top of mind to make sure that they're always checked off, or there's something that is written there for when we engage with the client. Because this way it reminds everybody, because you're getting so caught up with the day-to-day that you can always plan forward. And then again, all of those dates and everything is put into the calendar. But for us, it's our job to stay on top of things and to be mindful to help the client and also be mindful about the content or to help engage the community and find content or moments that are relevant.
I love it because what you do, I mean, you make it so simple, but you make it simple because you have it systematized, right?
Right.
Because you take the nebulous, the overwhelming part of social media of like, how can I get result with social media? We don't want it to be spaghetti against the wall. Like, well, we tried this one, we tried that one, right? So you, first of all, you strategize, but you are really good at execution because you systematize it. And then it makes it easy for the client to understand what they need to do so they don't get overwhelmed.
Right.
And then you measure results, right?
Right. So every month we send reporting. The reports, again, are templated reports that that we fill out with the different metrics, whether it's qualitative and quantitative, whether, the top performing content, the lowest performing content, and our insights. But again, that's based on a template. So again, analytics can also be overwhelming because there's so much data, but now we just go in and you can plug in everything that's necessary. And then once it's plugged in, you can take a step back to review to be able to have that insight and provide added value to the client. So we found that even for scaling, the most important thing is to have these systems in place because social media can be so overwhelming because there's so many moving pieces.
Absolutely. And it's also changing, right? Because, the social media platforms themselves change their rules, change what you can post or how and et cetera, or like how the engagement is, et cetera, right? So how do you keep up with all the changes?
I try to listen a lot. I read a lot. I follow different newsletters, blogs, people on social. We pay attention to trends. The clients find out things. So it's some by osmosis, some by word of mouth, some by just reading the news.
Yeah. So that's really why brands need an expert to do that, and trying to do it by yourself, it's really hard because you have to invest all the time to stay current. You have to invest the time in systematizing really what entrepreneurs, business owners, they shouldn't do it themselves. They should have a marketing director doing it, but they should be concentrating on execution and then get the help of actually systematizing it and putting it there. Absolutely.
Right. So we try to do the heavy lifting so the marketers can focus on their work and their day job so that we can provide that support. Because again, social media can be a lot of back and forth and can be very heavy.
Absolutely. So the way I see it is kind of like, you can be similar to a top brand like Lancome or L'Oreal, but with having you manage the social media, but you do not have to be that size because you're not full-time, right? I mean, you are basically you're a consultant that help the client, but do the heavy lifting, which is amazing. It's the strategy and the operation and the execution together.
Right. And we provide, so the way that we work is that we can provide any service. We can be full service or just one part of it. And what we've been doing now at L'Oreal is we've been providing a lot of social engagement. So our team goes in, whether it's 1 hour a day, whether it's 2 hours a day, or whether it's just to engage, we help them make sure that the back end of their social media is always going. And so that's been an interesting process to create automations there, because we're essentially doing a lot of customer service. On social media, clients come because they have a question or they want to complain or they haven't been able to find someone to help them. And so what we've been able to do is create a way to make sure that everybody is heard, and what we call like 100% response rate. So what we've done is created like a robust FAQ and worked on a process with the client so that when there's new questions, we send daily updates to the client. 3 new questions, 4 new questions, the client writes back, questions answered. And then we're able to keep going with this momentum. But in the meantime, we're building this robust response library that are really based on FAQs or client concerns that we're able to get back to the customer and make sure that they're responded to in the most appropriate way. So it's really a hybrid role of like social media, customer service. Really, we call it community engagement and community support.
Absolutely. And it's the content too. You're creating the content that way. So that leads to the community engagement. Love it. That's great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow. This has been a wealth of information. And I hope we inspired our listeners to really get engaged with the process, create processes around social media. What would you say to somebody that's listening to us right now, and they're probably in the back of their mind, they said, yes, we know that we need social media in order to expand the business, in order to make it more, professional, having a professional help us with social media in order to do that. But, they're kind of like not sure if they should do it or not? What is the pushing little encouragement? Like, why is it important? What results can they expect?
Well, first thing I would do is look at, and we always say, what does good look like? Look at your business and look at people that are like you and see how they use social media. So you can start to develop your point of view. Because don't do something just for the sake of doing it, because then you don't believe in it. Then the content's probably not good. And then it's going to be a burden for you to run it. But with the right social media, you can create a community around your brand, product, or service of people who are supporters, who are ambassadors, and ultimately, in like the best possible scenario, that it drives sales. Whether that's booking appointments, booking services, purchasing an actual good, generating some kind of revenue. That is the actual goal at the end of the day. But what's really great about social media is it's a low-hanging fruit that people are there. So it's trying to figure out how you capture your audience's intention in a very compelling way.
No, that's great. And it's really building that community, like you said. That's the first step. It's not not a direct sales. No, obviously sales will follow, and that's what we want, but it's really building that community. So that's great. Mimi, that's great. So in closing, can you share some of your favorite resources in terms of podcast or software or newsletters? What would you recommend?
So it's interesting because on the founder side, I listen to a lot of Audible books. I listened to The Hook Point. I listened to How I Built This by Guy Raz, just to be inspired and to constantly think, because what you can apply these notions or ideas to anything that you do. So that's kind of more from the entrepreneur side. From a tool perspective, we use Sprout Social. We also use Iconosquare. Sprout Social we use for planning and for scheduling and posting and analytics. Iconosquare we also use for analytics. I also use Planoly. Planoly is a tool which helps you plan your Instagram feed, and you can move it around like a puzzle. People also use that to schedule, so that's also a good tool. I'm trying to think what else. That's kind of like the two sides, I think. I listen to more podcasts about like entrepreneurial things. I subscribe to the blog from later.com, later.com, and I subscribe to Planoly, and I find that they always have the breaking news, specifically on later.com. They have great guides for how to use every tool specifically on Instagram, and their blog is amazing. And I also subscribe to Social Media Today, which gives like a lot of highlights of what's happening. They send daily emails, so you can just scan to see if there's something that may be relevant to you.
Great. Well, you just proved that, again, successful entrepreneurs, and they learn a lot, constantly listen, constantly want to know how other people make it, right? Like in terms of building the business and etc. So hopefully we inspired our listeners today in terms of building the business, in terms of engaging more on social media. And Mimi, if they want to contact you, what email address should they use?
They can either contact me through Instagram at Mimi Banks, on LinkedIn, Mimi Banks also. I'm Mimi Banks everywhere. Or to email, it's Mimi, M-I-M-I, at MimiB, M-I-M-I-B, social.com.
Good, Mimi B Social, Mimi at mimibsocial.com.
That's right.
Love it. And before we end off, I'd like to also give a thank you to Rachel Cholapsky from the Babysitting Company who introduced us. So she's a dear friend of both of us. And so thank you for being on my podcast. Very, very informative. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.